Hello, everyone. I am here with Helen, and she is in Shanghai, China right now. And she is an INTJ. She's a very active member of the community on the Facebook groups and very wise and knowledgeable and pretty much knows everything about MBTI. And and today we're going to talk about the differences in cultures and different things like that. As most people know on my channel, I do teach Chinese children, so I'm semi-familiar with the culture. I'm not going to talk about like I've never been to China, so I don't have hands-on experience with it. I grew up in California near San Francisco, where there's a lot of Chinese people, and it's definitely the influence is always there where I grew up. I grew up in Napa, which is just 45 minutes north of San Francisco, and being around Chinese people and Japanese too, in the same sense, and pretty much all Asians are on the West Coast. And however, my favorite food is Thai food. Sorry, not Chinese food.
My favorite food is not Chinese food either.
And I'm learning that Chinese food, obviously I always known that when ethnicities come to the United States, the food changes, obviously, and gets Americanized. And what most people think is Mexican food is not what I ate when I lived in Mexico. It's similar, but it's not really the same. And then there's, just different things like that. And so when I talk to what most kids in China eat, because they talk to me about their diet and things like that, because I was asking, what'd you eat for breakfast? Most people ate like bowl of rice with like milk in it or something like that.
Milk in the rice?
Yeah, some kind of white water or some kind of white broth. It's in their rice and they eat it for breakfast.
Okay, yeah.
What's that called?
I see. In Chinese, we call it pao fan. It's like you use the soup, put in the rice, and you maybe have some small dishes to like eat with. Yeah. I think the Japanese also like that.
Yeah. I grew up eating rice, milk, and sugar. My mom made me that, and that was on an occasion when we had like extra rice, because Americans eat a lot of rice too, and which is funny because our curriculum I teach the children, they make it sound like we never touch the stuff. Like bread is all we eat nonstop. It's like, nom, 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 nom. And I'm gluten free. So I'm just like, no, I don't eat bread. And it's my students always staring at me like all confused. And it's interesting, and definitely I agree with C.S. Joseph's, analysis on it being an SJ society. It's definitely a very powerful SJ society, a lot more dominant, like America was probably 50 years ago, and so I don't want to trigger SI demon too much, but you wanted to talk about growing up, as an INTJ female, no less, in an SJ society, and you believe that your father's an ESTJ and your mother's an ESFJ.
Yes.
So that's a double SJ family, which is common.
Exactly. I'm not sure about other families, but I remember like when I grew up, I always feel like my parents, they don't love me. Okay, so when I grew up, when I was a kid, I thought my parents, they didn't love me, because my dad spanked me a lot. Like whenever I didn't get a perfect score at school, like I had trouble at home. So usually my mom was trying to help me out, but usually most of the time she was with my dad, or she kept quiet, unless my dad was like hitting me too hard, then she will help me out. So I remember when I was a kid, I always worried about going back home, and I don't feel comfortable staying at home. Don't
Okay.
feel like, oh, this is my home, my parents, they love me, I want to spend all my time with them. Not that feeling. um until I think I went to high school. Like I start to have my own friends. Oh, like when I was a kid, I think my parents, they knew all of my friends, and they will like judge them, like, yeah, you don't spend time with this person, he or she is bad, something like that. And until I went to high school, I think I started to rebel. I started to make my own friends. And I started dating. And my dad was like, I had my first boyfriend, and my dad was like, coming to school, like after school, he came to school and wait for me to go back.
Wow.
Just,
This is sounding like a Jehovah's Witness household. Okay.
I don't know.
All
I
right.
don't know. I feel like I tried every way to run away from them. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I know. Okay, my dad will be waiting for me. So I told them, okay, I have some like after school activities. So like later, it was pretty funny. Um, but from that time, I started to realize that I have my own preference, I have my own thoughts, and I don't like the way that my parents treated me. But it has been too long, so I feel like it's really hard to say no to them. I was so scared, like at
Yeah.
home, because I was afraid of like my dad um, being angry at me. So um, yeah. So I think like when I went to college, I I spent most of my time in college, even during weekend. Like all my classmates, they went back home. I was like, nope, I want to stay in school. So spend
Interesting.
weekend with, yeah, in college, something like that. So um yeah, so when I told my parents that I wanted to go to the US, they thought I'm crazy. Literally, they feel like, yeah, look at your cousins. They are all married, having kids, and they have a stable job. This is what your life is supposed to be. You should be like them.
Okay. Very affiliative notion there.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, how old were you when you wanted to come to
Wait.
USA?
Um, 34, I think.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Um, yeah, I mean, I can concur with that.
Yeah.
And so, what is the typical age most Chinese women get married when you grew up? Because I
I
know it's
think before
older than
30.
before
Before
30.
30. Yeah, before 30.
Okay, and let me interject something, and you can tell me this is true or not.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've gathered in Chinese culture, even if the woman is a doctor and she's doing
Mm-hmm.
surgery, as
Mm-hmm.
soon as she gets pregnant, she quits her job and
Mm-hmm.
stays home.
No, it's not true in China. At least not true in Shanghai or some more developing big cities. No, it's not the case. Usually, women they keep their jobs. They still work after having kids. Like there are not many people, not many women, being like a housewife.
Interesting.
So.
Because I mean, my moms are all, to me, seem like housewives. I mean, they must obviously work still, but
Mhm.
um, it's still, when I ask my students a question, who cooks, and it's always mom or grandma, or the grandparents live there.
Yes, this is the. I think it's like both parents, they have to work, because like in China, most people when they married, like um before you get married, you need to have your own place, like an apartment. It's not a rented apartment. You have to buy an apartment.
Okay.
yeah, so like, the price is like insane. It's over 1 million, sometimes $2 million, for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And like, think about that, like, for a couple, like usually the guy has to buy the house, has to buy the apartment, um preferable without mortgage. So
Okay, interesting. Um, yeah, I'm basing this, based on what my students tell me and what I learn from the other teachers and things like that. And that's
mhm,
interesting to me. And it definitely seems weird, I think, when I talk to my students, because 90% of them live in apartments, at least, maybe
mhm,
95%, and living in an apartment is, unless you live in a major city in the United States, it's kind of looked down upon, like you're poor.
mhm, mhm.
And
I see.
and so owning a home in the United States, and I don't want to get all patriotic and stuff, but it's pretty easily, for most
Yep.
stable people, maybe not
Yes.
in California, and I don't want to say blue states, but in the blue states, things are a lot more expensive. There's a lot more
Mhm,
taxation. There's a lot more difficulty in owning a home and even having a family to begin with. I grew up
yeah.
in California, and I remember moving to Tennessee, and it seemed like when I moved to Tennessee, life became easy. It was on easy
Mhm,
mode because everything was so
mhm.
cheap. I mean, granted,
Yeah.
I have plenty of things to complain about Tennessee culture, and
Mhm,
there's definitely a lot of ignorance there. But,
mhm,
I saw 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds getting married and buying a house off the bat. Now, granted, they
mhm.
had a
Yeah.
mortgage, but the mortgage
Right.
was like $500, $600 a month. Who cares?
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's nothing,
Uh-huh.
and so it's definitely a different mentality. And me moving around the world, for the most part, if you own a home or own an apartment in another country, you inherited it,
Mm.
for most cultures that I've experienced, And like when I was in Greece, for instance, it seemed like that the families lived in these giant commune buildings that are like 3 stories high. And there was
Mhm,
like 3 generations in this one building,
mm,
and they all lived there. And that's how my Airbnb was set up.
mhm,
Because I was like in one of the rooms, and so they just left. They rented me this whole section. I had my own kitchen. I had the back patio and all this. It was real nice, and it only cost me like $325 a month to live in Greece. It was ridiculously cheap. Um, which is why why I do what I do. I travel because living in the United States and working remotely doesn't really make any sense. And I guess that would also apply to China because it's very expensive to live there, so moving
mhm.
away would make a lot more sense.
You
Now,
mean you mean living in China is expensive,
you,
or
if you're saying you're paying $2 million for an apartment,
in
that's
yeah, in
ridiculous.
like Shanghai or like Beijing, like even more. It's really ridiculous, and it's like a kind of like the pre what do you call, like, you must have a place to live before you can get married. It's
I
like
get
a
that.
rented, yeah, it's unacceptable. So it's just insane.
Yeah, I've known that from Asian cultures. Obviously, I was raised Jehovah's Witness is a very international religion, and so you meet people from different countries and different things like that. And I remember like them coming to the United States and seeing uh, Americans getting married at 19, 18, 20,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just absolutely disgusted by the idea of.
Mm-hmm.
And in Witness's case, you're not allowed to have sex until married. And so they would get married, and in many cases move in with the parents,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents were okay with it because, oh, they're not sinning anymore, and so, oh, they're not going to sin. And so like you get
Uh-huh.
married, in my opinion, as a child, you know,
Uh-huh.
and then you're like 19 years old, and then you live with your parents, and it was to me that's absolutely embarrassing, to get married and do that. I don't think any of
Yeah.
my friends that are Jehovah's Witnesses that did that are watching this, so that's fine. But
You know
uh,
what's funny? Sorry. Like when I came back last year, because my company, I have a place in that is like a small apartment close to my parents' place, but it's about like almost 2 hours one way, from my office. So I told my parents, nope, I'm not gonna spend like 3 to 4 hours on commute every day. So I rent an apartment where I'm living now, close to my office.
All right, we're
In
good.
many people's eye, was like,
Uh,
why do you do that? Are you like a local? Yes. Like, do you have a place to stay? Yeah, I do have, but it's too far. Do you feel like, why do you spend time on renting? It's like they just
yeah.
cannot understand it. So for me, it's like, why wouldn't I? Like, now it's only 15 minutes walk distance from my office. So I only spend like half an hour by walk on commute. So I can save a lot of time for myself. So yeah,
Okay.
it's so funny. Yeah.
Uh, you and I mean, we're golden pairs. I have SI inferior, you have SI demon. Typically speaking, when I talk to INTJs and INFJs, when they talk about
Mm-hmm.
their past, it's always really, really critical and negative. Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever thought about that and like maybe thought that maybe
Yes.
you made it sound worse than what it was?
Yeah. So remember when I told you my childhood, the story of my childhood? It was all about the negative emotions.
Yeah.
So I believe there was like a lot of good times with my family, with my parents. I just don't remember them. So
Okay.
everything that I can remember was just like, why would I like leave family? Why would I choose to like live all by myself?
Yeah.
It's like this. Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why, like, especially like NJs and primarily are able to just go, and if you look at the story of Jesus Christ, even as an INFJ, he left
Mm-hmm.
his family to go
Yeah.
preach a new religion, and didn't even care
Mm-hmm.
about his family, and he's affiliative, and
Yes.
that's
Yep.
something I've seen about NJs is what you guys can do is you can be focused, and you can just like, I'm going to America, bye,
Yes.
and everyone is with their hands up going, what the hell, and why aren't you wanting to be here? Now, myself included, I can do this stuff too, and I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've lived in 8 states, United States, and packing up and leaving with a few things is no
Yeah.
problem to me. I've been living on literally 2 backpacks for 2 years, 3 years now, and I don't care. I mean, but that's
Mm-hmm.
SE demon, and possessions are meaningless to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just like so a lot of people see me like wearing the same clothes. I'm just like, I just wear clothes, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like it's not nothing special about them,
Yeah.
not anymore. Maybe when I was younger and more shadow focused, I cared more about my appearance and my looks, but as I've gotten older, it's actually gotten worse, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so unimportant to me. And so when you talk about like Chinese culture in itself, uh,
Mm.
everything's about tradition and
Yeah.
about being part of this community.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
everybody has a role in the community, and individuality is not part of it.
Um, it's kind of like you can have your own thoughts, you can have your own opinions, but if it is against the community, how do you say, or the social norm, or the ethics or the traditions of the family, then it's wrong. They will tell you, like my dad always tell me, like, this is wrong. You shouldn't do it because it's wrong. Like the reason he gave me is like, I'm older, much older than you. I've seen more than you have done. You have seen.
Yeah,
So I have more experiences. So I'm telling you from my own experience. And I love you. So I tell you what you should do. It
yeah.
sounds, yes, it
Sounds like an
sounds
SJ
like,
father.
yes. I mean,
Yeah, Yeah.
I don't know, like
Because
maybe when I was a kid, I was scared of him. So I was so scared of him, like punching me. So I was like, I couldn't say no. But now I feel like it's just like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
yeah.
that's your experience, but it's not mine.
Yeah, so SJ society is very hierarchical, very
Mm-hmm.
about what do you call it? Seniority, like how long you have
Ah,
been there, you know, and
right.
so your value to the company has a lot to do with how long you've been with the company.
Yeah,
Now, to us
that's true.
pragmatics, that makes no sense whatsoever. Either you're
Yeah,
productive or you're not.
that's true.
And so your past, what you did 20 years ago, is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that steps on a lot of people's toes, people who really believe in pensions and they believe in being taken care of. To
Right.
somebody who's an NT, we don't necessarily think that way. And so to me, it's like everyone should take care of themselves. And so if you don't have a retirement at 65 and you're sitting there dead broke, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my job to give you money. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and it's kind of like you have that issue right there. And then people are like, well, I got this disability or I got this problem and things like that. Even then, to me, that should be handled out of my own will. Like I want to,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem giving people money. I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs to be my choice. And I think what
Yes.
you're telling your story is that if your parents would have maybe gave you more choices, because I think an INTJ is going to excel in school regardless, for the most
Yeah.
part. You guys do have your self-destructive side, but for the most part, if people were educated on what type their children were and what type they are, and what all this
Mm-hmm.
information, we can all be much better parents. And I don't have any children. I don't think you do either.
No.
And is that a problem? There's no.
Of course. Of course. It's a huge problem.
Okay, and I imagine so. Uh, and so if you like, I want to talk about this with Eugene and with Jennifer about teaching my
Mhm.
students. And it seems to be my main students who are Chinese or seem to be ESFPs over again. And the parents are like,
Mhm.
I have no idea how you're able to handle them so well. I let them do what they want. you know
Yeah.
Eventually they're going to come
Right.
back and do their lesson. So
Yes.
I let them get up, scream, whatever SPs do. They throw stuff, get angry, that's fine. And so I
Yeah.
just sit back there and wait, and they're like, and then they come back and they finish the lesson, everything's fine. And I think a lot of like the SJ teachers, which is the majority of teachers, are SJs as
Mm.
well, and they're like, no, that's not the way the classroom is supposed to be handled.
Exactly. Yes.
And so these SP boys and girls are just rebelling against the system so hard
Mhm.
because they're being demanded by their parents, and then they come to a screen and some American woman is demanding something out of them, or a man, I
Mhm.
shouldn't be sexist, but is demanding more time and restriction from them. And so when
Mhm.
it comes to dealing with pragmatic Chinese students, for instance, I like to get their respect
Mhm.
first,
Yes.
and whether that makes them laugh, be cool in some way, whatever that is. And so I think,
Mhm.
would you agree that it was like if everybody understood typology, for instance, they're like, well, we can just let Helen do
Not
this.
even. Yeah. I mean, like, maybe even not necessarily understanding typology because it's quite complicated actually. But as you said, like, if the teachers can give students a little more choices, like ask them like what do you want to do or what do you like instead of tell you you should do this, you should do that,
Yeah.
that would be much better. Like, my cousin, she is a primary school teacher, and her daughter is an ENFP, and she's like they came to my parents' place today, so I had some conversation with a girl. She's maybe 7 to 8 years old, and because her mom is a teacher, and she goes to the school where her mom is working. So she is definitely has a lot of like restrictions. And I think her mom is also ESTJ. So like she has so many rules. Like when you eat, you should sit like this. Both arms should like put on the table, and you should hold the bowl like this.
Yeah.
And you should use your right hand instead of left hand. And you shouldn't talk while you are eating. So there's so many rules. I feel like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because my mom told me that the girl was telling her dad, like, Dad, can you find a new mom? Because my mom is too harsh on me.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, poor girl. Yeah.
That's
I think
interesting.
most of the teachers in China is like that, because I think they have a very high, maybe I don't know, like a standard on the kids. Probably it's I don't know, from the government, I guess. They want the kids to learn a lot of things, like they can do, they can speak English, like before primary school.
Okay.
They have to learn a lot of other stuff, um, yeah, before school age. So I just feel like they don't really have the freedom to choose what they want or to try out. Yeah, I can try this. If I don't like it, maybe I can try something else, right?
Yeah.
I assume this is how the school or how the kids learn stuff in the US.
Well, I'm not going to come to the defense of the U.S. educational system because it's a mess in
Mm-hmm.
a completely different manner. It's strict and rigid with stupidity, like, politically correct things, what gender pronoun
Uh-huh.
you're going to be, whether or not you can teach this subject because it's racist, and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And again, that goes back to being an NT. Information is information. Whether
Yeah.
it's racist, sexist, that's irrelevant. That does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
those are just, semantic games and you just arguing over stupid stuff to us.
Yeah.
And I have to deal with this even in my job somewhat, but I would never work in the school system in the United States for that very reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Mm-hmm.
literally insane. And most of the people working for my company, and a lot of them are SJs, left because it was so unbearable. The teachers themselves,
Uh-huh.
with the constant drama, with the just impossible piles of paperwork and just stuff that has nothing to do with teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a big issue. And if an ESTJ teacher, I mean, they're a dime a dozen, they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, ESTJs and INFPs are definitely pretty common. Quite a few ESFPs too, who are teachers, I've noticed. But yeah, and so like, what is the unifying thing in China? What did the SJs latch onto? Why did they insist upon this way of life and tradition? What's it for?
I I think they're afraid of being different. It's
Okay,
like it's safe to be like everyone else. So you don't stand out, then you're safe.
interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
and so what do most Chinese people think about Hong Kong protesters, for instance?
The the news is blocked. So most people they don't even know what's going on in Hong Kong.
They might not know, but what do they think about people like that? What do they think about NFs?
Well, they'll think like those people they're crazy, like because I think that's the fake news that the Chinese media they brought to the public, or some like I don't know, foreign medias they brought some news that is fake in favor of China government.
Yeah,
And people, because they don't know the fact,
yeah.
like, oh, they saw this news and they believe, okay, the Chinese government is doing the good thing. They're trying to
Keep
um
the peace, keep things
con-
stable, and
yeah,
SJs like
control
that.
the
Yeah,
yeah, control this but why are you not so grateful about the government? Why are you still like killing people, being so defensive? So I think most of the people, they have no idea what's going on. For those people, they have VPN, they have access to some foreign medias. They, maybe half of them, I don't know, they got some like a fake news, or they're like
Yeah.
manipulated by the government.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting you mentioned that because, obviously I have my issues with the media in general, and most Americans, it's kind of funny when I see people claiming to be like anti-fascist, anti-corporate, they hate the big agenda, but then they watch MSNBC, Fox, NBC, ABC, CNN, and all of these are controlled by corporate billionaires.
mm,
And then they
yeah.
believe it. I'm like, well, why do you even
Mhm.
watch their garbage? I mean, obviously this is coming from these idiots, that you're apparently
Yeah,
opposed, but you believe whatever they're telling you, and which I
right.
find absolutely funny. And that's just
Yeah,
how ENTPs, we just laugh at the world as it's burning, and
yeah.
what I was getting at was what you're saying, that they don't understand it'll be as normal, and that kind of is the case still in the United States, because obviously SJs are the majority of people here. And
Mm-hmm.
what I was talking about before we got on recording was the United States, and I'm waiting for SJ society to create this new glue that keeps everybody
Mm-hmm.
together, because right now
Mm-hmm.
you have a very polarized nation of right
Mm.
wing and left wing, but in
Uh-huh.
the past they still had Christianity,
Mm.
and that's kind of
Yeah.
on its way out. And so
Uh-huh.
now you have nobody saying, well, at least they're Christian. They may think differently, but at least they're Christian. Now you don't have that.
Uh-huh.
Now it's they think differently. They're the enemy, and it's different,
Right.
and the whole Christian thing. And now essentially the right wing is like, they're not Christian, and these people they're superstitious and things like
Yeah.
that. And so it's interesting when you talk about like SJ society. And so what countries have you lived in besides China and the United States? Or is that it?
None.
No other. Okay. And
No. Yeah.
we were going to talk about how you thought about America when you first came here.
Yeah, like
Well, first
when
things
I
first,
went
how old were you? How
sorry,
old were you when you came?
34.
34, and you already
Yeah.
graduated college and everything?
And of course, I worked for a bank as an HR for a couple of years. So just one day, I felt like this life is so boring. Like a
Yeah.
work for the company and doing the same thing like years over years. So I feel like no, I need some change. But I didn't know what kind of change did I want. So I decided, okay, I wanted to quit my job first and give myself a career break. And that pissed my parents off
Yeah,
big
I
time.
bet. And so as an
Yeah, yeah.
INTJ, I'm assuming you went to the ocean and you boarded a pirate ship, and as a wayfarer came across. Is that how it happened?
Well, yeah. So, so after a couple
Arr!
of so after a couple of months, I told my parents, okay, I don't want to find another job now. I wanted to go to the US to get a degree, get a master degree. And they're like, what are you thinking about? But I I decided to do it anyway. So I spent some time preparing for the test and the applications and got the admission. Then went to Cornell for
Wow.
2 years. Yeah, for 2 years. It was not easy. you know, um, yeah, of course, there are some people in the program that are older than me, much older than me, but most of them, they're like just got off the college. So, or just with like 1 or 2 years experience. They're like in their 20s. So I'm definitely like the old ones. and and I think like I don't know the culture, the U.S. culture, because like Ithaca, the place, the small town I lived in, it was just a small town, so it was very I don't know. It's not the U.S. culture until I went to New York New York City one day, and I feel like, wow. The first impression was like I saw discriminations, like very obvious, like the white collars, they're or white people, the bankers or whatever, but all the restaurant servers or the people, the waiters, waitress, or the people working in a subway station, those people, those blue collars, they're just like immigrants.
Yeah, like usually probably Mexicans or some kind of Hispanics, more likely in the
Yeah,
restaurant
yeah.
worker.
Like to me,
Uh,
it's very obvious. So I feel like, okay, I think this is what people call discrimination. I mean, it's not like I'm not like judging them. It's just like my first impression, or like um my understanding about how people treat like different races like differently.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Uh,
Um, yeah, I can't speak to New York. I've only visited there a few times, and I don't
mhm.
really care for the city. It's not my favorite place to be.
No,
I
not
essentially go there for Broadway, and
okay.
and then I get the hell out. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, that is interesting. You mentioned that. In Napa, where I grew up, which is a big tourist area with restaurants and things like that, I worked restaurant
Mm-hmm.
work no problem, and
Mm-hmm.
um, there definitely was a racist stereotype of a certain image needed for certain roles or certain positions to have so you can advertise and market better.
Mm-hmm.
And so typically speaking, but I worked restaurants no problem as a white person.
Mm-hmm.
I worked, side to side with, Mexican immigrants or Guatemalan immigrants.
Yeah.
And granted, many of them could not advance just because of their language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in a lot of these cultures, it's encouraged not to learn too much English and not to become too American. I'm sure you probably can sympathize with that. Maybe Chinese might be the same way. Um,
Yeah, I think like in China, like English is pretty much encouraged. It's
yeah,
like you have to learn it. It is like one of the survival skills, sort of like that.
yeah. But even you have to admit when you learn another language, like I've learned Spanish, and you kind of have to adapt a Spanish
Oh,
culture
sure.
more or
Of
less
course.
to
Yeah,
be able to
yeah.
speak it, in any
Mm-hmm.
kind of understanding way. Because what do they say? It takes 5 years to learn a language, 10 years to learn their jokes, because the
Yeah, yeah,
humor doesn't make
exactly.
any sense. Humor
Right.
in Mexican humor still does not make any sense to me. The whole like ay 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 ay, chaching thing, and I'm like, what are they talking about? And it's like, like, why is this funny? Uh, and that's fine. And I love Mexico. I've lived there many
Uh-huh.
times. I have no issues with it. And
Yeah.
but it's, yeah, the humor is definitely hard to learn.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And like I told you beforehand, Mexican culture for the most part is very male, patriarchal, dominant SP style. It's all about men being good with their hands and knowing how to work and how to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, for most people that grow up, at least with a strong influence, not knowing how to fix your car, not knowing how to, fix your house and do little things, at least, you may not
Mm-hmm.
have to do construction as a job, but you should
Mm-hmm.
at least know how to do it at home. Now, granted,
Right.
by second, third, fourth generation in the United States, that's kind of gone. And then there's a whole different culture, and they call that like Chicano culture, but in Mexico itself, most men where I live down in the Cancun area, unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
drop out around eighth grade, and they start
Mm-hmm.
working in the tourist area.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so it's all
Right.
about how well can you learn English, and that's how good of a job you can get, essentially.
Yeah, I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
when I
I,
was,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
it's not a big deal.
No, no, just about to say, like in China, like when you learn English, it is a subject. Like it's not a real language or culture. You don't learn culture at school. You just learn the language as a subject. So most people, they can get a high score at school for this subject, but they can not really like use the language. They cannot like talk with foreigners.
Interesting.
So that,
Okay.
yeah, that's the yeah, that's also why I feel like, yeah, I like I like English and I like Western culture. So it's, to me, it's necessary to live in this culture and experience this culture to see what it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, so for me it's not just a subject. um
Yeah. Well, it's it. I'm rehashing, going backwards, and sorry, that's the way my mind works. Something came up
mhm,
when you
yeah,
mentioned like people in the subway are
right,
typically speaking, when the government got involved, they wanted to have like we call like affirmative action hires, which is they have to have a certain amount of types of people in government work.
mhm,
And so there's like a
mhm.
stereotype when you go to the DMV, everyone's black, for instance, because it's like they
Yeah,
have to hire them,
okay,
and my ESFJ worked in the government for longest time, and he was a white male, which was a big minority in government work,
uh-huh,
and and there was definitely a lot of different things he had to work with and things like that. And so what perceptions, what that is, a lot of that has to do with government interfering and things like that.
mm,
America's in a
mhm,
weird transition right now, and it used to be more or less everyone wanted to start their own business and have their own company eventually, and that was
mm,
the dream, and America was all about being entrepreneurs. But now we have like a new whiny generation. It's my generation, the millennial generation, where they want a job, which is weird to me. And I think as a pragmatic, you and I, we both think that way. The idea of working for somebody else just sounds terrible,
uh-huh.
you know? And
It's a I mean, like it's a way to get some stable income, but I
yeah,
always want to do something for myself. I just don't
correct.
know how. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the whole reason I'm even doing teaching what I'm doing was just the fact that it allowed me to travel, and that was the whole
Yeah.
reason I'm doing it. Originally, it was to
Mhm.
be a missionary, and evangelize, talk about Jesus all day, and that was originally my goal. And now that I'm agnostic, and that's the thing in my past, it's just like, what now, and
Mhm.
I don't have a family to go back to, so I got to completely just go forward, which is fine.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go to Europe. And if I might interject, like different cultures I've noticed in Europe, for instance, I think the Hungarian culture is so funny to me, because the people
Oh.
there like walk around with like a rain cloud above their head all the time, and it's so emo and just like, and what I want you to do is, after this interview is over, is like Google the Hungarian national
Okay.
anthem and read it,
Okay.
and
I have to write it down.
it's so funny. It's like, oh Lord, we have so many trials and so many problems, but we still pursue on, and it's just so funny to me. And when I was over in Hungary, I was semi-dating an ENFJ who was all bubbly and nice and happy and stuff like that, but he was always talking about
Uh-huh.
his culture, because ENFJs are
Mhm.
very affiliative people,
Yeah.
and so granted he may not agree with the way the culture was, but he was still a part of it, very much
Mm.
so,
Mhm.
and so he was always talking about what's funny, and he just loved Budapest, and I love Budapest too. I recommend to anybody watching this right now. It's my favorite city on the planet, and uh, it's a very cool place to visit. And it was just so funny
Uh-huh.
to me, because everyone was like, uh, and I don't
Do you
know.
feel like people there, they're happy?
They're happy.
Like,
That's just the way they are, though, and that's
I
fine.
see.
And like I
Yeah.
like I tell people, I get along with everybody, and Effie Child's fine being around people like that, no problem. But it's when
Mhm.
people are like up and down and bipolar, that's when it starts to be like an issue. If someone's continuously like just pessimistic, that's fine. I don't care.
Okay.
Be that way.
Okay, I
That's
see.
great. You
So
know,
you mean like if the person has to be like emotionally stable.
correct.
Okay.
Whether that be, you can be emotionally stable and a complete asshole, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
You know, and you're just like that all the time. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, that's just the way that guy is. That's great. You know, and I know what I'm going to get
Hmm.
when I'm around that person. And so
Yeah.
I can understand their pattern. And when you're dealing with any hero and you're trying to figure out someone's pattern and they're crazy, you know,
Hmm.
we're going to run into some problems. It makes me very uncomfortable, you know? And
Yeah.
so then I'm like, bye, you know, and that's what makes me wonder how like people like John Beebe, who is a clinical psychologist and deals with people on a regular basis. I mean, he's old
Oh,
now, but I don't see myself being able to do that. You know,
wow.
I see myself doing it for 2 years and freaking out and quitting, you know, and leaving even my own practice, because no way. Uh,
I think there are some like ENTP therapists. Like
I know they exist. I know it. I mean, I'm
yeah.
talking about
So
myself. I'm
it's
just like, because I see my kids for 25 minutes a day and I'm done with them, you know, and
yeah.
I'm not like the other teachers that like build these like relationships with them. And
Mm.
like I have regulars that see me on a regular basis and we have a cool thing, but it's not like I'm like home. A lot of the teachers are like, how do I mail to China? I need to mail them some stuff, you know, and they're like mailing them
Mm.
like pens and papers and all this other
Uh-huh.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why would you buy something that's made in China then ship it back?
That's true. That's so true.
It's an Indian
Yeah.
giver. All right. And so it's, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, but
Yeah. It's so funny. So to me, like FE child is usually like good at dealing with I don't know, like you are able to um sense other people's feeling. You can feel what other people feels about. Like so to me it's kind of like your capability to how do you say like um, join the group, like join the community, whatever it is, as long as there's a vibe going on there, you can use your FE child to absorb that vibe
yeah,
and
and blend
to
in.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's typically. I think that ENTPs typically fare better in society than INTJs by far.
Yes.
I definitely think INTJs have the reputation of stepping on toes all the time, and you know, and constantly finding themselves in trouble with FE trickster.
Hmm.
And they think they understand what people value, and they don't, and so then you have a bunch of issues. And in all honesty, which is too bad, because in my opinion, INTJs are a lot more sensitive and emotional than ENTPs,
Yes.
and it's more important for you, you know, to someone value your moral compass. For me, I don't care, you know, but it's kind of like the world's there and I can navigate through it, you know,
Hmm.
but it's like they're all tuna and I'm like, I don't know, a different fish, you know, like a mackerel or something, a sardine or something. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, yeah, I'm a fish, but I'm like in this other school of fish that, and I don't really fit in. And that's just kind of
Hmm.
how it's always been with me. And, you know, when you were telling your story in the very beginning, it sounded a lot like a witness upbringing, you know,
I think so.
a very,
I,
very
I think
religious like style. And you said your mother was barely Buddhist, you know,
right.
and
Not really, actually, but I always think about like a family, especially like affiliative family. They can look like a cult, like a
yeah,
small cult, right? Because you have your certain rules, you have certain like requirements on what you should or shouldn't do, right? And you have to follow the orders of the senior people. So it sounds like a small cult.
yeah, I know it is. You're right, and it's getting less and less like that in the United States, because there used to be, like, my last name was Cowan, so it used to be like, this is the way Cowans behave. This is the way we're
Oh yeah.
supposed to be, like a
Uh-huh.
tribalism. And I obviously
Right, right.
fit in with my tribe, you know,
Uh-huh.
and what I did was never really what everyone else did for good reason. My family was kind of crazy. And so when you describe that, and I'm not an SJ hater. I'm not. It's just interesting
No.
when you have their society, and the ability of rules, and this applies to NFs too, because NFs are bossy as well. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think with this interview is just kind of like, and then with the Jennifer one, trying to people. I think NTs are probably the most misunderstood. Um, and
You
it's
mean misunderstood by SJs?
yeah, SJs and NFs and SPs for that matter, even
So affiliatives usually.
because
I
even
think
I was just
yeah,
saying,
I feel like SPs they are like they can understand us a little bit better because I have some like ESFP friends, like we can have some conversations. So because like we are both affiliate, no pragmatic, so I think we can understand each other better. But
yeah,
with affiliatives, no, it's really hard.
yeah. I think especially with you as an INTJ, you don't have an affiliative side at all,
No.
and I don't have an interest side at all, and so
Uh-huh.
I understand what people value, what they're going to do, what's going on, how society works, what's the system, but I don't understand why that system's there. I don't understand why
Mm.
that system's important. And so when
Mm-hmm.
it comes with, when I was saying with SPs as pragmatics, they have that interest side. And so they would be like, well, Helen, it's in your best interest not to go to America and to stay here and
Yes.
keep your apartment. And so they'll just toe the line because
Mm-hmm.
is it in my best interest to do this? And so they have a better way of connecting with SJ Society.
Exactly.
That's why
Yeah,
they're the golden pairs going like this, and they're
that's
connecting.
right.
And so they're like,
Uh-huh.
well, yeah, I don't like the system. Yeah, I don't like this forcefulness on us, but it's in my best interest to go along with it, so I'm going to. Well, me, I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, and so I'm just like, I have no interest in the system, but
Mm-hmm.
with ENTPs, it's kind of like we figure out the system being triple systematic, and we just figure out ways to exploit it, and so we can do what we kind of got to do, and it seems like the NTJs just like crash through instead of finding a way to sneak through, and so like the
Right.
NTPs can like we're sneaking through, even INTPs are included in there too, and we're like
Uh-huh.
not part of it either, but we kind of figure out ways, or try to at least, not to
Yeah.
break down walls and not to cause too much turmoil. And so I think we can hide a little bit better in some
Yeah.
ways. It
I'm
just,
not sure. I'm not sure if it is also like it has something to do with the NISE. It's like I sometimes I feel like okay, if I want to do something, for example, I want to go back to the US, so I want to go back. So this is like the goal, right? It's really hard for me to change this goal unless something really bad happened and I change my my goal. Otherwise I'll just like okay, I'm going no matter what. So
yeah,
kind of like you're I don't know, it's like you're just like super focused on this one option and you don't see other opportunities here. Like in Shanghai, I can live like a easy life, right? There are so many opportunities here, but to me, it's like no, this is my option. This is my only option. It's just
okay.
like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, that's not the way I think at all. And to
Yeah.
me, I see the world as an option, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of hard for me to stay focused. And so with me, people are like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, I want to travel. Where are you going to go? And my hands are up in the air. And so typically speaking, what I do is I just throw myself somewhere and figure it out as I
Mm-hmm.
go. And so
Yeah.
that whole long-term planning thing is obviously not as organized as you guys, with the high end eyes. So it's just like I just like people are like, "What would you do in Europe? And did you make plans to do this kind of stuff?" No, I literally flew to Greece. I had a month long rent, and renting an
Uh-huh.
apartment there, and then I was going to figure out after that where I was going to go. And so I went to Greece, and then someone's like, "Well, why don't you go to Egypt?" And I'm like, "That's a good question. Why don't I go to Egypt?" So I went to and so then I was
Uh-huh.
down in Egypt, and then I went back up to Greece and finished off that right there, and then I was in Hungary, and then um, someone called me up and said, "Hey, why don't you come to Israel?" And I'm like, "Okay," and so that's kind of what I like about Europe is it's kind of like in the middle of all this stuff. And so
Uh,
next time I want to go there, I kind of just want to find some place cheap, you know, even maybe
mm,
even Ukraine or you know, or uh, Romania. Um, I do want to stay in Hungary, but they're part of the Schengen visa, which
uh,
only allows Americans to stay there 3 months, 90 days, and then I got to
you
be
need a
gone.
visa? Interesting.
Well, it's a tourist visa, and it's only 90 days max, and it covers
Okay.
like 21 countries, and so it kind of screws us over in that way. And if I want to get like a year-long visa, I have to sign like a lease with some kind of
Uh,
homeowner. I gotta like
mhm,
have, I don't know, I think 10, I don't know how much money I need to have. I know I need to have cash, and
mm.
which is fine. All that stuff might be doable, but it's kind of like that's kind of how I am. And you're like, I have a goal, but you say America. Where do you want to go?
Um, I mean, no, I
It's
don't like 3 years, no, 4 years ago when I first went to the US, I was like, I don't care which place do I go. I just want to go to the US and go back to school. That was my goal that time. So after came back, like I just want to return. So there's no certain like a place I want to stay. Of course, I prefer California because that was the plan when I left. I plan to go back to California, but probably my company will send me to Michigan, to Ann Arbor.
okay.
So that's
Michigan State.
yeah,
Well, no, Michigan itself.
yeah, Michigan.
The university's Ann Arbor. Yeah, the Wolverines.
Right. So like at first I was like, No, I don't want to go to Michigan. I want to go back to California." But like later, I figured that okay, at least I can go back to the U.S. Right?
Yeah.
If I existed, probably my company won't sponsor my visa. So, like, okay, let's
Yeah.
be yeah, let's have some strategy.
Now,
So
granted,
have some
I would not
yeah,
want to live in Michigan. I have friends up there. I dated an
yeah.
ENFJ that was living up there actually, and
Hmm.
he lived in oh, I can't think. Um, it doesn't matter. Some kind of river or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't want to live someplace cold like that. But to talk about something positive about Michigan versus California, I would never live in. I would live in Michigan before I lived in California.
Oh, really?
That's where I'm
Because of
from.
the living cost,
Yeah,
or
living costs and just life itself is just terrible in my opinion.
mm,
You literally
mm.
have policemen in the sky and airplanes and helicopters giving you tickets. You've got cameras giving you tickets. It's um, although this is all normal for you, so that's fine. But then when you get a ticket, you know the ticket's like $500, $600, you know, and then
What?
you're yeah easy,
Wow.
and then your rent is triple. You know, you can
Uh,
live in Michigan, and in certain areas, you can buy stuff a lot cheaper for a lot higher
yeah.
quality of housing. Granted,
Hmm.
paying for your heating is very expensive. I've been told in Michigan,
Hmm.
and I think that runs pretty high. But the closest I've lived in Michigan was Nebraska, which it was
Hmm.
fine. You know, I played a lot of video games in the wintertime. You know,
Well, I think it's fine. Because I spent 2 years in New York State. It was cold too, so I think it's okay. I mean, it's not as good as California, but it's much cheaper.
yeah,
And I've never been there, so to me, it's like okay, let's see. If I don't like the place, at least I'm in the States, right? I can change job, I can move again.
yeah.
So
Let's
yeah.
leave this on a happy note. And after you learned about MBTI and Jungian psychology, found C.S.
Hmm.
Joseph, found other YouTubers and things like that
Yeah.
that kind of explain things. Looking on your past, I looked through it a negative lens too. Were you
Hmm.
able to understand your parents better?
Yes.
Okay.
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
um so like I can understand like why did they behave uh like that, and I now understand, okay, they do love me. They don't hate me, so it's like, yeah, I understand them. But at the same time, so for me, I know that we are not compatible. Although I think SFJs are my like third and fourth high compatible types, but it's just not. It's really draining when I spend time with my mom. But I I understand why she does what she is doing. So it's okay. So my way is to, okay, I cannot keep a close relationship with you. This is not who I am. So just be okay with me not living in China. I have my own life. So let's just respect each other. That's it. That's
So
my solution.
rebellious.
Yeah.
Yeah. To go along
You
with
know
what you're
what?
saying about your mother and your compatibility with it, a lot of
Yeah.
her issues with you, you don't know what conversation she's having with your father.
I
And so
think,
as an
yeah.
ESFJ woman, she's going to take his rule of law, and that's going to be her SI implementation.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
she's
Yeah.
going to, take that general, because,
Yes.
ESTJs are
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the generals, and
Yes.
like drill sergeants, things like that. And so the conversation is, oh, no, you need to talk to Helen this way because you're a woman, and this will make her behave.
Mm-hmm.
And any
Yes.
child could be like that. They'll just create beliefs of, oh, this is what will happen now, this is what she's going to do now if we just do this, if
Yes.
I can just be more SI, like, this is going to make her do this, which is the
Right.
opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting, with my dealing with SJs, is in no form of communication could I get them to understand that their way was not what I was going to do, and that
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to happen. And so, like you said, the best thing I can do is just accept them for who they are.
Yeah.
They do accept us. They do.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's not
yes.
what they want. I mean,
No.
it's not what it should be. It's not ideal. But yeah, like you said, your parents do love you. And my
Mm-hmm.
mother's an ISFJ. And now, granted, looking back on my past, um, ENTP is her aspiration. And so
Mm. Yes.
there was a connection there that I didn't realize existed, in all honesty, because I don't feel, and that she had with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that my ISTP brother was the favorite, but I'm her favorite. And it's very,
Huh.
it's very devastating that I've left the religion, because the religion is the family.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't hate my mother for shunning me. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because like
Mm-hmm.
literally her whole sense of identity is being a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm.
And so the fact that I've left that, in her mind, I rejected her.
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
And
You kind of like abandoned her.
correct.
Yeah.
And so I have to come to that realization. That's not going to mean I'm going to go back, crawling back, and say, oh, please forgive me, I believe again. That's not going to happen. But
Uh-huh.
I understand where she's coming from,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
than I did
Okay.
before. And I can look back, as an SI user, I mean, the past is always in my mind. And so I'm always thinking about it. What if this would have happened? If that would have happened, this would have happened, and you kind of just like, I don't know, think of this abstract alternative endings,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, it is what it is. And so
Yeah.
we actually just really talked for like a long time. I don't know how structured this was, but
You're
essentially
just
we just
rambling.
we established, we're ramblings, that's fine. And established, China is an SJ society. America is
Yes.
still an SJ society in a lot of ways. It's a little bit different. China kind of has like the government and tradition and culture to attach
Uh-huh.
themselves to. America
Right.
used to have the religion, and
Yeah.
that's going away, and so you're seeing a lot of splits now in the
Mm-hmm.
culture because not everyone's Christian, and the people who even are Christian aren't really Christian, and so or they're well, I haven't met a Christian in my lifetime that actually followed everything the Bible told them to do. Because you have to pick and choose what you're going to follow.
Yeah.
Because obviously,
Right.
in Western society or in modern society, half of the stuff would be obviously illegal. Because you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to kill your children for even if your father wanted to. But
Yeah. When I was a kid, I believed that he wanted to kill me. Sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. I do eventually want to get to Shanghai, and I think the city's beautiful, and I love the Bay Area. Is that a river, or what is that out there? Where the
In
big
Shanghai?
yeah, in Shanghai you have that big glowing ball spear going up.
Oh, there are like a couple of like those really, really high buildings.
No, on
Like,
the water there's this like
oh, underwater?
it's like an Eiffel Tower, but with the ball in the middle, and it goes straight up and it lights up at
Oh
night.
yeah, that's the TV tower.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so that
That's
actually
not that's not that. I mean, this one used to be the tallest one, but not anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do the pictures make it look better than what it is?
I've never been there
What do you
myself.
hear?
I think it's just like a tourist place, like most local people, they don't spend the money and time go to those places, just like packed with tourists.
Yeah.
And it's expensive.
Well,
You
I
have to
didn't say you
buy
had to go
you
into
have
it,
to pay. Oh,
but you
yeah,
can
if
just
you just want to take a picture, that's
yeah.
fine. I mean, yeah. I've
Uh,
never been to
have you
be like been into the place.
have you
Yeah.
been to Shanghai Disney?
No.
Okay.
No.
All the kids say they hate it because it's so many people.
Oh yeah. I mean, like in Shanghai, like every place is like full of people. All those places. It's like, yeah, I hate that too.
20,
I
24
don't want
million in the area?
30, more than 30, I think. More than 30
30
million.
million in the area. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, more than that.
some of my students
This
will
is,
say, I'm from a
yeah.
small city and it only has 12 million. The largest in America is 8 in New York.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. And so,
Oh.
I mean,
Yeah,
you can
so,
argue like metropolitan areas and things like that.
yeah.
But yeah, so we'll finish off this, but we'll definitely talk more
Okay.
about culture in MBTI and things like that, and
Yeah.
the way it affects people's lives. Well, let's really quick. Do you
Hmm.
feel that what you learn, because obviously the MBTI you get taught has an American bias.
Yes.
It's a very
Yeah.
American bias and social
Hmm.
behaviors and things like that.
Hmm.
Is it applicable in China?
This is a very good question. I've thought about that. I think because of the language, I learned the English version, so I'm not sure about the Chinese translation. So if like we translate it into Chinese, I'm worried about like the meaning will be twisted. So I'm
Yeah,
not quite sure about the quality. So,
but
but for the English version, I think it's pretty applicable, like from my observation.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can pinpoint the interaction styles in Mandarin.
Yes.
So you can
Yes.
find somebody who talks like me, is a starter,
Right.
blah 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 blah
Right.
blah 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 blah. But
Yeah.
in speaking
Yes.
Mandarin, and then you have somebody who's control, direct,
Right.
initiates in Mandarin, and then
Yes.
obviously the INTJ finisher, then the background
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think you made a very good point. I think it was with Jennifer or with Abby about the what's that? The stereotypes.
Okay.
Like when you type people by their stereotypes, then I think that's very like culture focused. Maybe this certain behavior only applies to Americans. It doesn't
Yeah.
apply in China. Yeah, that's why I think the type grid it's very useful, because if you dig a little deeper into, okay, why did they say that? Oh, because they are interest based. They're not systematic.
Hmm.
So then at that moment you can tell, okay, they're SP or NFs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
are most men in China expected to be SP like?
Um, I think
What's the
so.
ideal man?
I think it depends on which part of the country you're talking about. Like, for example, in Shanghai, like the Shanghainese men, they're expected to be very ISFJ or ESFJ,
Male.
like male. Yes, they they kind of like, okay, you have to give your like a bank card, like your all the savings to your wife when you get married. It's kind of the woman will be in charge of the money in
Okay.
the home. Yeah, and the husband will do housework. They might cook. They will like pay for all the bills, and they will buy gifts to their wife, something like that. So very like SFJ males. So
Yeah.
this is like a typical. This is like they call like a nice guy in Shanghai. The
Interesting.
ideal, yeah, the ideal husband in Shanghai.
Because
Yeah,
what are they supposed to do? Marry SFJ women?
I don't know. I think not necessarily. Not
Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah, SFJ. No, not SFJ. Some maybe like NTJ. I don't know. Yeah. So usually like a or SP women.
Yeah.
So someone who is more pragmatic than them.
That's
Yeah.
crazy to me. Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. No, we can talk about that and
Yeah.
difference. I mean, Chase has said many times, and I tend to agree with them. I think if it's funny is that the ideal man is an ESTJ in American culture.
ESTJ. Huh.
ESTJ.
Interesting.
Granted,
Huh.
the stereotype of what people will consider toxic masculinity is an ESTP.
Yeah.
Uh, but the reason why they like ESTJ men is because they're going to do good in school, they're going to follow instructions, they'll probably go to the military and serve their country. You know, look at the
Mm-hmm.
political spectrum. Everyone's an ESTJ who's running for president, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
it's only been recent years where you have like an INFP Bernie Sanders and an ENTJ Trump, or I typed Pete Buttigieg as an INFJ. He's not really going anywhere and doesn't really fit in for obvious reasons. And but typically speaking, you think everyone's ESTJ, 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 ESTJ,
Mm.
ESTJ,
Interesting.
and they're the captain of the football team. They play quarterback, and like just type Tom
Mm-hmm.
Brady as an ESTJ. What is Tom Brady? Is the everything to an American man, Um,
Huh.
Granted,
Interesting.
the underlining SP culture is there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we'll stop this here. Thank you for being
Okay.
on, and definitely we'll do this again because you and I are actually in the same sleep schedule. Because it's what time is it for me right now? It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I have not gone to bed. Uh, and that this is typically what I do. And so when people were like
Okay.
sending me text messages like in the middle of the day, and they're like, "Why isn't he responding?" I'm like, "That's what's going
Okay.
on."
You
All right.
work every night, right?
Not, well, lately I have because kids have been out of school, so I take advantage
I
of
see.
that when I can work more.
Okay.
And we are stopping now.